Welcome back to the channel. Wanted to take advantage, had a couple hours here before I got to start prepping for my next client trip, and we're out here on a project just trying to lay some paint lines out and stuff so some contractors I've got can work while I'm on the road. One of the things I want to touch on today, guys, is water sources on food plots. Water in general, right? But these water holes right here, guys, there's a couple of big things that jump out to me. Yes, they look cool, and you can plant clover around them, and boy, it looks really neat, right? But you do not want this water hole on a food plot. Now, this landowner put this water hole in years ago. It was a clay spot right here, and it always held water, and he just made it better, because it was in the timber and there was no food plot here. But now there's going to be food here, and now that we're building the property, and I highly recommend not doing that because it takes from the attractant. Over the years, I've learned, I guess you could say the hard way, or we started putting a lot of focus on our water attractions years and years ago, and really learned how important that is to the piece of a puzzle that is to the success, especially as a bow hunter. What you don't want to do is you don't want to add water to a food plot and a licking branch and your feeder and mineral station all in one spot, right? You're taking from all of the power of those attractions. What you want to do, guys, so there's two things. One, you want to make sure that these water holes are always kept at a point of impact in front of a stand down the chain of the transition away from your food sources, right? Away from your food plots. The reason for that is, a perfect example is, the deer out here in the food plots during that nighttime hours, and instead of them being able to stop at a water hole right at daylight or just after daylight in a better hunting scenario for you on their way back to bed, what you're finding is they're going to water here and they're going to go right back to the closest bed, and you kind of take a piece of the attraction out. So in other words, instead of them stopping on that line of travel per the contour, let's say from here about 150 yards that way to the west, we have a water hole 100 yards that way to the west. And the reason is, guys, is because we can get into that stand while the deer are out here. Kind of give you a little visual of this. This is all a food plot, and way in the background, way over there, you can maybe see the snow on the seat, but that's a Millennium lock-on that we've got down there 100 yards off the end of the food plot. And we access in down below this berm, down on the back side of the hill, all the way down through here, pop up right into that stand location. There's deer here in the plots. This is where the feeder was last year. And the deer don't know you're here. You crawl into that stand, daylight comes, deer are still out here at that food plot or on the feeder. And all of a sudden, as daybreak comes, they're heading back to bed. The does are, they go there to water, and then they transfer right back down into the doe bedding areas. The bucks go back in further, they're hitting it. So it just kind of helps daisy chain or amplify that line of movement, right? So I'm just as guilty of that as anybody, guys. It wasn't until, 15, 20 years ago where it was like, wow, the power of water, right? I wish I would have known that really, really early on in my bow hunting career, because it surely would have put a few more bucks on the wall, right? It's so attractive, especially during a dry year like we've had the last few years. It's really, really attractive. And what's good about a water hole, guys, is you can get away from it, right? It's kind of like a shot plot or one of them bullpen plots that we talk of, right? They get to it, they take a drink of water, and they're gone. It's not stagnant deer out in front of you, so you can get in and out of that stand location without getting busted. So that's probably the most important piece, right? But just after that, or maybe just as important, is the health standard of it. A water source like this, guys, that has open mud around it that you can't control because of the climate, right? The hotter it gets, the lower the water is, you get some water in it, it turns back to mud, goes down. It's creating this rim of mud all the way around these. Even if you plant them, yes, you can get more water. There's probably 2,000 gallons of water in here instead of 150 or 200 or 300 gallons in a water tank, and I get that. But here's the deal. I'd much rather have to fill a water hole once or twice a year. If they're 150s, my 300s, you really don't ever have to fill them, I find. I make sure I fill them once a year, but back to this here, guys, that what happens is you'd be shocked on how much of a EHD hazard this is. Sadly, I've been, I do this for a living, guys. I travel the country and I see great properties devastated. And when devastation hits through EHD, it's not just well, we lose one deer here and then we'll have a successful season next year. It takes your property, could take your property out of play for 4 or 5 years. It's hugely devastating, and for whatever reason, it attacks bucks more than does. I don't know why that is, but it's the truth. So the midge lives, that bug, that fly, that midge lives in that cracked mud. And what happens is as this elevates and sinks and goes down, it exposes that mud. And when they go there to drink, they suck that in, and you have a serious problem. And there's nothing you can do about it. Fly traps, stuff like that will help, right, around feed stations, keeping your feed stations dry. But one of the most important things that you can do, I feel, is to just go the extra mile and take these water sources out of, these big water sources out of the edge of food plots. And we're making all this mud is open around them. And like I said, guys, I've seen folks put liners down and then plant it, put dirt over it and then plant it, and then so it holds water right, and then put, it's got the grass on it. So then as the elevation changes, yeah, maybe it doesn't have as much mud, right? But it still opens up those pores of that soil, and I've seen it happen, a lot. I recommend, I've got a lot of clients that can attest to this around the country, is I really go the extra mile on like these old cattle farms that we landowners get and we put back into deer production. Those water sources, much like this one, were for cattle, and that's not the production side of it that we need right now, right? So what we have to do is we have to use our heads, and we have to take those out of play. And then the importance of the attraction at that point of impact at your stance follows that, right? But the health standard of it is a huge piece of it, guys. And like I said, the older I get, the more I start focusing on that. And I really like to focus on that with my clients as much as I possibly can. It's one of those things, like I said, is when you see that devastation of what that can do around the country, it will rattle you to the core. And I just go the extra mile to try to not do that anymore, so that's what, one of the topics I want to touch on today, guys, is just the emphasis of that. It's not only, like I said, the health standard, it's also going above and beyond for that attraction part of it. So I've always been asked, can we put I've got cold hands here, can we put I think it's Analogics is making the treatment that goes in the water. I haven't used that myself. I've had some clients using it. None of that stuff I don't think is bad. It's a prebiotic or whatever that you can put in there. It's probably good for the gut health and stuff. I don't treat my water holes, guys. Like I said, I've learned over time to jump to those 300-gallon water tanks instead of our 150s, because they do hold more, more water, obviously, but they do hold that a little bit longer, and they maintain themselves. The one that opened my eyes on my farm here in Kentucky last year was, I've got a bunch of 150s, and then I put a 300-gallon, because I shut a pond down, I put a 300-gallon one up top in one of my shot plots, and right out in the wide open, right? And it's a great early season evening spot. And what happened, it's right out in the open, right out in the sun. And that 300-gallon tank, the only reason I put water in it is because I just had extra filling water tanks up on the way out of that Banks water bladder that you see in the back of the side-by-side I use, and I'm just stopping there and emptying it out. I probably wouldn't have had to put any water in it at all. Can you treat them? Yeah, I guess that's up to you. One thing I don't recommend doing is there's so much there's so much of this stuff out there that folks have tried, right? And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but sometimes it gets overboard. Putting Kool-Aid, salt, all that stuff in your water tanks, I don't promote that, I guess. There again, if you put salt in there and they're getting salt and the water, does it make them drink more? Yeah, but if you had a mineral station somewhere else, and then a water hole, and then a food plot, you're just enhancing that line of travel, so why put it all in one, right? So, and I'd probably there's probably something to be said for the health of it too, as far as the amount of salt that they're actually taking in. I don't know that. I mean, I haven't researched that, but I'm sure that, drinking salt, gallons and gallons of salt mixed in the water per day probably isn't a great thing. So anyway, just take that one to heart, guys. Just wanted to take a couple minutes here to stop before, like I said, I got to start getting rounded up for this next client trip that I've got here coming up. Just take that into consideration, guys. These holes here, if they're on your property, shut them down, and by all means don't fall victim to that cool look that you see so often of the big celebrities putting these water sources on these food plots. It's not the thing that you want to do, and you're taking a huge part of the attraction away, and you don't have that power of what that water hole really allows you to do down the chain at the point of impact on at a bow stand, guys. So that's kind of my rant on the water hole situations. But like I said, probably at the pinnacle of it is just the health standard of it. And as land stewards, I think that's just another one of those things that we can do to make sure that we keep those areas around them tanks, guys. When you fill those water tanks up, there's no mud around them, right? They stay dry. I plant Kentucky 31 grass and ryegrass and clover around them, and they're dry. They're always dry, so there's no mud. So you kind of take that hurdle of that what if, the midge, right, of the EHD. So just want to share that with you guys. Thanks.